Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years retirement community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and today we are thrilled to welcome one of the stars of one of the most iconic series of all time, an animal welfare activist and creator of Gentle Giant's pet food, a recipient of a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the author of the fantastic memoir, Boy Wonder, My Life in Tights. Please help us welcome Burt Ward. Burt, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, citizens.
Well, to start with, in the case of art imitating life, you grew up in a performing family. Your family owned a traveling ice show, and you're in the record books for being the youngest professional ice skater, which you were by the age of 2.
Yes.
What was that show like, and what can you remember about it?
Well, my father believed in an early work ethic, so I think 2 might be a little on the early side. But my father owned Rhapsody on Ice, which was a predecessor to Ice Capades. Wow. And he traveled, the whole family traveled with the show all around the country and sometimes out of the country. And they had some of the top ice skaters in the world. And I remember just little snippets of working at that time. And what would happen is the 2 of the top skaters would come out and they'd introduce, okay, here's a 2-year-old that, is learning to skate, and they would hold my hand and, skate around this big arena. And, people are kind of clapping, how nice and everything. But then they let me go and I skate by myself, and people just went nuts. They'd never seen anything like that. And as far as my memory goes, what I remember were, these very bright lights. And because the lights are all on the ice, and the ice is very reflective of the light, I couldn't see anybody out there. I could never see anybody out there, but I do remember, just the thunderous, I wouldn't say just applause, but just kind of cheering and unbelievability of a child at that age, and this is back like 1947. This is
wow.
Pretty unheard of at the time. So it was wonderful. And and then my father, eventually he sold the show. He moved to Beverly Hills, California. And that's where I then grew up in going to school there. And that's where I started learning about real estate. My father became one of the top 3 real estate brokers in Beverly Hills, California. And ultimately, working with my father, I met a producer who sent me to an agent. And that's how I began my career.
Well, I have to ask you, where did you go to school in Beverly Hills?
It was called Hawthorne Elementary School. I rode we lived at, my father built a home at 1125 Coldwater Canyon. It was like, at the time, it was like unheard of. It was 300 feet long. It was a really big house, the size of a football field.
Oh,
and I remember riding my bike, down Rexford Drive to Hawthorne Elementary School. And then I went to Beverly Hills High. And from there, I went to UCSB for 1 semester, University of California at Santa Barbara. Then I came back to UCLA, and I was studying both professionally acting with professional coaches, and also at at UCLA. And it was then that when I was on a weekend watching a house for my father, when people would come in, you hand them a brochure and let them look around. But it was a famous producer named Saul David who had produced Von Ryan's Express, those movies, and Skullduggery. And I don't know. I just said, hey, would you be willing to watch a scene? He said, well, okay. He wasn't expecting to, he's looking for a home, not expecting for an actor to ask him to watch a scene, but he did. And he was so nice about it. He said, I think you got a talent. And let me send you to an agent. And he did. He sent me to an agent. And the agent, the first thing he said to me was, I can't get work for the actors I've got. I would never take a new person. The only reason I'm taking you is because this producer called me. Don't expect to work for a year. And if you get a job, you might have one sentence to say. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, all right. And kind of left there with my tail between my legs, so to speak, kind of, wow, taken down a bit. And then it was a couple of weeks later that I got a call from some secretary in his office that said, there's something going over at 20th Century Fox. Well, they're seeing a whole ton of young guys. We got an appointment for you tomorrow. Be there at 4:30 and you'll get a drive-on pass and they'll tell you where to go. I said, oh, well, gee, what it's about? And they said, we don't know. We just heard that there was something over there, so go over there. So I had no idea what it was. Wow. And I went to 20th Century Fox and I went in to see where the casting director was. And there was other young guys there. And it was my turn. I went in, I talked to him for a couple of minutes. He said, would you like to meet the executive producer? I said, sure. I mean, I figured, this was my first interview, so I really didn't know what to expect. I figured, well, everybody gets to meet the executive producer. Well, that's actually not true, but I didn't know that. Okay. So they sent me to another bungalow, and that's where they have them. They, instead of offices, they have like these separate bungalows, 20th Century Fox. And it's kind of like the old style of movie making you would imagine, to be. So I went in to see, and this time I went in to see the executive producer. And again, because I had never even been on an interview, never even on an interview, that I wasn't intimidated. I mean, most actors have been turned down so many times. And, it's not like, you're selling Fuller brushes or something. They don't like your brush. I mean, if you're an actor and they say, oh, you're not right for the part, or I don't think you did, you are the product. And so I can see where it would emotionally hurt people, and really devastate some people if they're sensitive. But because I hadn't had that rejection, I just walked right in and said, hello, sir. And I shook his hand. And he was like, oh my, I mean, it just like almost went backwards from, but it was friendly aggression, And he kind of looked at me for a minute and he said, I think you're kind of big for the part. I said, oh, but sir, I promise you, I won't grow anymore. And he laughed. I mean, like, how can you stop from growing, right? So he said, well, okay. And he asked me a couple more questions. He said, would you like to do a screen test? And I said, sure. I mean, doesn't everybody get to do a screen test? No, but I didn't know that. So I left there, and it was a couple of weeks later, I was called in to do a screen test. And I went in and they said, well, we want somebody who's athletic. And now this is in 1965. And I had started studying martial arts, which in probably about 2.5 years before that. And actually, karate came to the United States in 1959. So it was just a few years, and most people never even heard of it. But I had, and I had studied. And so I did some, and my screen test, by the way, is on the internet. You can see it, where I did just some judo falls and stuff like that. And I broke a board with my hand, which nobody, had seen anything like that. And so that was that part. And they said, okay, well, now we have some dialogue. And they handed me a single sheet of paper. And on the sheet of paper, it had these, short paragraphs. And, there was nothing on the paper except these paragraphs. And one, with the title on one was Dick, which was me, another Bruce, and Dick and Bruce, and just dialogue. Nothing about Batman, nothing, no last names, not like Bruce Wayne or
you still didn't know anything at this time, right?
And plus, where I lived, they didn't have Batman comic books. They had Superman comic books, Superboy. I'd never heard of Batman, but there was no mention of Batman. So all I have is these, dialogue. So they said, let me introduce you to the actor. This was, I guess, an assistant director. Let me introduce you to the other actor who's going to read the part of Bruce. And I said, okay. So they introduced me to Adam West. And, they had like an open seat. I said, hey, would you like to run some lines? Or just, that's where you kind of just say things back and forth and you kind of practice a little bit. He said, sure. Well, he and I instantly got along. I don't know, sometimes there's certain people you have chemistry with, and Adam was like one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. Just incredibly sharp and witty, and just really, I mean, in 5 minutes, the two of us were laughing, and we never stopped laughing for 50 years. I mean, we just really got, and it was just really good chemistry. So we got up and we did our stuff. Again, this is just, in civilian clothes, no costume. And they said, okay, we're done. And I said, fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I started to leave. They said, wait a minute, wait. We're not done with you yet. I said, oh, there's something else? They said, yes. We want you to go clear over to the end of that sound stage. And let me tell you something. These sound stages are gigantic. It's like walking 3 blocks to get to the other end. Over on the other end of that sound stage, there's a dressing room, a trailer there, which is a dressing room. We've got 2 wardrobe guys gonna help you get dressed. And I kind of stopped for a minute. I said, well, no disrespect, but I'm perfectly capable of dressing myself. He said, oh, no, you don't understand. And I said, and they said, you just go over there, and these guys are waiting for you. And then you'll come back, and then, we'll continue. Okay. All right. So I go over there, and I go into the dressing room, and it looks like a giant couch, but I mean, a couch, it's got to be like 12 feet long. It's just huge. And on this, and it had no back. It was just like a giant, I guess, couple of mattresses or whatever it was. Anyway, all these clothes, just from one end to the other. And I said to one of the guys, am I going to put some of this on? They said, no, you're going to put all of it on. I said, what? Anyway, they helped me get dressed into what I can tell you unequivocally was the most uncomfortable costume of anything I've ever worn in my entire life. Everything itched or pulled hairs or pinched. It was god awful. It was a nightmare. And I mean, for example, the mask they put on me, it irritated my eyelashes. And if you ever had something that irritates your eyelash, it puts you kind of in an uncomfortable position. The tights were so thick and heavy, and like they pull the hairs on my legs. It was just, oh my gosh, I couldn't find anything that was not painful or itchy or something. So anyway, I put this thing on, and I mean, it took a while to get it on, but then so they said, okay, now you can go back to the set. Well, you can only see straight through the mask. There's no peripheral vision. There's nothing down. You could only see straight ahead. So as I was going out the door, I nearly broke my neck on the step, because I couldn't see it. But wow. I turned around before I closed the door, and I said, because, being an optimistic person, right, I figured I would say something optimistic. And I said, well, I guess the good news here is that after another 15 or 20 minutes, I'll never have to wear this costume again. Like famous last words, right? And then I went over to the set. I hobbled over to the set. There's no comfortable walking. This is hobbling, man. This is like just, unbelievable. And I get over there and I see this young, this guy I met, Adam, and he's in a cape and a cowl. And I'm saying to myself, what is this? I mean, is this some kind of Shakespearean period piece? So I don't know. I have no idea what this is. Wow. And we did our dialogue, and it was only afterwards that I started to look up, what's Batman, and I found out the comic book created by Bob Kane, the same person that we're the same company that was doing Superman, which, by the way, as a kid, I was like a Superboy fanatic. My mother had a photo of me on a tricycle with a bath towel around my neck held together with a clothespin. And I rode my tricycle. I wanted to be Superboy. And when I would come home from school in the afternoon, from not just elementary school, even from high school, I was kind of a quiet person. I didn't have, very many friends. And usually I was by myself. and I would just get out on our where we parked our cars and the cars there, and I would just like kick a ball against the wall and kind of daydream, I don't know if you've ever done it as a kid, but for me it was like, I'd kick the ball in the wall and it bounce off and I run and kick it back, and I'd be daydreaming about being Superboy. And I actually believe that thoughts can become things, because I really thought about it a lot. I mean, and so anyway, then it was, I started about a week after I did this screen test that I started getting calls about once or twice a week from the studio. And they would ask things like, well, what's your shoe size? Okay, well, it's 7.5. Another one is, what's your hat size? Well, I never wore a hat. I don't know. They said, well, you go get your head measured. I said, oh, well, okay, well, where do I go to get my head measured? I hadn't, it was really naive about this stuff. And I kept saying, well, geez, I haven't heard. I don't even know if I got this. I mean, they're asking me these questions. And anyway, after 6 weeks of waiting, I get a phone call from the agent. They said, hey, the agent, this was the secretary, the agent wants you to come in so you can sign contracts. I said, fantastic. I said, now I'm going to be formally represented. I mean, I didn't have anything on paper, but now I'm going to be officially have an agent. So I go in there and I drive to Century City. I was living at the beach in Santa Monica. I go in there and they put me in a little tiny room, and with a table and a pen, and there's a contract. I'm telling you, it's got to be 1.5 inches thick. And I started, I say, gee, I didn't actually start reading it right away. I just looked at it and I said, gosh, I can't believe that's such a big contract for just to be represented by an agent, And as I looked closer, I said, oh, it said 20th Century Fox on there. So I got up and I went and I opened the door. I said, excuse me, I've got the wrong contract here. I'm here to sign my agency contracts. And they came over and looked at, no, you got the right contract. I said, well, wait, this says 20th Century Fox. They said, yes. And I said, well, you mean I got this part? They said, yes. I said, nobody told me. And the agent was stunned that the studio hadn't told me. And then when I went to the studio a few days later, they were stunned that the agent hadn't told me. So 4 of the 6 weeks that I was waiting, I actually had the role, but I had no idea. And then I met this executive producer again, William Dozier, and he was very nice. And I said, oh, it's great to see you, sir. And thank you so much. And he said, well, would you like to know why we selected you to play the part of Robin? I said, yes, sir. I would like very much to know. He said, well, in the last 1.5 years, we've interviewed more than 1,100 young actors for this role, all across the country. Did a national search, over 1,100. And the reason we picked you is because in our minds, forgetting television, if there really was a Robin, I mean, what if there really was a Robin? What would he be like? And we think that you personify what we would believe would be a real Robin. So we don't want you to, quote, act. We actually want you to only do 2 things: be yourself and be enthusiastic. Well, for me, being enthusiastic is like drinking water. I mean, I'm that kind of a person. That's just my nature. So I didn't have to do any, all the acting I studied and all of this scenes and going to the zoo to duplicate a kangaroo and the way they move. I mean, all the things I had studied, I didn't need. I just needed to be myself and be enthusiastic, which is my nature. And it worked tremendously. It worked tremendously for me. And that's how I got the part. And later on, I think that I eventually got my star on Hollywood Boulevard, like 50 years later. I mean, I tell people I'm a patient person, but 50 years, I mean, don't you think that's kind of a long time to wait? I think it is. And right after I got the star on Hollywood Boulevard, and they what they do is that there's kind of a tradition that whoever receives this honor usually puts on a little thank you party after the event. It was like 11 in the morning. So from 11 to 1, they closed off Hollywood Boulevard. I mean, they had like, dozens and dozens of video cameras and photographers and everything. But afterwards, right around the corner is called the Hollywood Museum. And I rented that to put on a little event afterwards and kind of a thank you. And my press agent invited a whole bunch of people that either were on Batman or knew me or whatever. And I was surprised at this little party afterwards that who came was Robert Butler, who was the director of the pilot episode of Batman. Wow. I hadn't seen him actually in 55 years.
Wow.
And I mean, and I just want to tell you that I was surprised. He says, Burt, I have something to tell you. I've got a story for you that you don't know about. I said, really? And he said, yes. He said, when we were on the set, and the executive producer, Mr. Dozier, came over and pulled me aside and said, we just hired this young actor, okay? And he hasn't got any experience acting, hadn't even been on an interview, but he seems absolutely right for the part. But we'd kind of like to know if you think you can work with him. I mean, we're just a little bit concerned. So would you go over and talk to him and see if you, interview him kind of about stuff and talk to him and see if you think you can work with him? And, I remember him coming over to me only because, like, he was like director. I mean, on the set, director is like the most important person, and saying, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, oh, yes, sir. Right. And he and I talked for a minute, a few minutes, actually. And I thought, gee, that was really nice of him to come over and talk to me. I had no idea that he had been sent to talk to me. Anyway, so here's at this event, right after I got my star. And he said that we went back to the executive producer and Mr. Dozier said, well, what do you think? He says, do you think you can work with him and direct him? He says, let me tell you something. He says, this guy is such a natural that I'm not going to get in his way. I'm going to stay the heck out of his way, because anything I tell him to do is not going to be near as good as what this guy can come up with by himself.
Oh, that's great.
I'm hearing this 55 years later, wow. Right? I mean, what a compliment. But like, as an example, let me give you a quick example of something. Again, this was one of the scenes in Batman, the first episode, with the Riddler played by Frank Gorshin. Jill St. John played Molly, the Riddler's girlfriend. And there's a scene where outside of this museum, the Batmobile pulls up and Batman and Robin jump out, okay, and we go over to the side of the building, and that's where we're ultimately going to walk up the side of the building. And this is in the first episode. Well, where they had us park the Batmobile, okay, I mean, most people open the door to get in and out of the car. I mean, mine, because of this, I mean, why open the door? I mean, maybe to go in, but most of the time I would just jump over the door to come out. But in this case, because they parked the Batmobile facing the opposite place where this museum was, I stood up on the door and walked along the fin and jumped off the back. You see what I mean? Just doing what I felt was right, because the director said, hey, you guys are going to pull up here. You're going to get out. You're going to go over to the, you're going to go over to the warehouse, to the museum. And so when I did that, of course, I was supposed to come out the door, right? I wasn't supposed to stand up on the door. So I'm, of course, out of picture frame. And I wasn't supposed to walk along the back of the fin. So when I did that, they said, cut. Oh, he says, Burt, you can't do that. We have it arranged for you to come out the door. Just open the door, come out the door, and we'll, we are all set up to film that. I said, okay, all right, I'll go do that. And then as I got back to the car, he said, wait a minute. He said, actually, what you did was much better than what I came up with. He says, I think what you did was so natural. Let's film that. So they took another 45 minutes to lay plywood down, level it, put their dolly on it, that they have people that push the dolly and the cameraman sits there. And it's a kind of thing I call it's a dolly shot or a trucking shot where they follow me along. And they shot it that way. And, there was kind of like an example of something that I did thinking, that's how I would do it, right? I wasn't thinking like, oh, let me just go out this door, turn left. I mean, it was like, what would the character do? And he loved it. And it was throughout that, not just that pilot, but I'll tell you something, which I consider really a compliment. Neither Adam nor I, for all 120 episodes, were ever told by a director, by any of the directors we had, how to say our line. They might tell us, well, you're at, you're in front of the Bat computer, or you're sitting in the Batmobile. They'll give you stage direction where you are and where you're standing, or maybe if they'll say, hey, and then if you would, when you say that line, cross over here and, do that. But nobody ever told me how to say a line. And the way Adam and I had such a chemistry together. I got to tell you something. I reacted because I just reacted. I mean, I was right into it. I was like living it. It wasn't really acting like you'd think. This was me really taking that next step from kicking that ball against the wall. I was totally into it. So as big and grand and slow talking as Adam West was, I would talk much faster, and I would counterpoint everything he did. And I'm hearing the crew laughing and them saying, cut it. Hey, keep it quiet here. We're trying to film. In other words, people, even in the crew who knew that we were filming, were getting into it, because Adam and I, what we did and what we tried to accomplish, I must tell you something. I'm really proud of a couple things that we did, that what we did even today is used in every major superhero film and almost every major action film. And if you want to know what it is, let me tell you, and this is something Adam and I created. We created where we didn't want to just, back in 1966, if you were alive then and you watched television, there was the good guys and then there's the bad guys. And as a viewer, you just watched from a distance. You were not involved. You didn't feel any personal interest in it other than just pure entertainment. But Adam and I, our attitude was, no. We're going to do everything we can to reach through that television set into people's homes and grab these kids or grab the parents, get them into what we're doing, which, of course, is a tremendous challenge because you can't physically do that. You can only do things by the way you act. So, and we succeeded. I got to tell you something. But on this thing that we created that is now used in all films, and I think when I tell you what it is, you'll recognize it, is that whenever we would have in Batman, like a serious moment, as an example, going into the villain's hideout, we're now looking for the Joker. There was a scene looking for the Joker. We're going to apprehend him. And all of a sudden, 8 guys, giant. I mean, everything was, of course, so bigger than life with Batman. Every one of these guys is like 6'5" or bigger. 8 guys kind of just come into the scene, and we're going to have to fight them, right? I mean, they're there to fight. And so right in this most tense moment when we're going to have this big fight, I have a line to Batman. I said, gosh, Batman, there's 8 of them against 2 of us. Odds in our favor, right? Because there was only 8 of them. Right? And this is used in every major, you look at all of the Marvel movies, you look at DC movies, you look at movies like Bad Boys, where the 2 guys they're shooting out and they're dodging bullets. And, one of them will say something like, if we got out of this alive, I'm never coming over to your house. I mean, there's always a moment of levity in the middle of action. That was created by Adam and I back in 1966 and 67.
That's amazing. Well, I want to talk about Adam a second, because from your memoir, and yours really is one of the best showbiz memoirs I've ever read. It's just really, now it's clear you have an incredible fondness for Adam, but at the same time you say some hysterical stories of how he tried to be a scene stealer, so whenever he could. So what kind of things did he do, and did you ever speak to him about it?
Oh, all the time. And you see, what he used to see as an example, like for example, we would have dialogue in a two shot. You know, that's where the camera is focused on both of you, and you're facing each other. You're having a dialogue, okay, and you're both, you know, on camera, and both you're heard, okay, recorded. Well, what he would do, you know, he was very smart. Adam, and he was so playful about what he did that you really couldn't get angry about him. You understand? But he did some pretty horrible things. So, for example, he would have these lines, and he knew, and he thought about it, that this was a 30-minute show, right? And he knew that the longer and slower he talked, the longer the camera would have to be on him. And if the camera is longer on him, it's less on everybody else, right? I mean, he calculated that. So he would have a line or two or three sentences, right? And he would slowly, I mean, I would like almost nod my head to fall asleep with how slow he would say them, and so stiff and stoic, right? Like Batman. And then I would have a line like, "You're right, Batman," right? Yes, Batman, just two words. And when I got to my line, instead of letting me say it, I'd say, "Yes, yes, Robin." And in other words, and then he would start talking slow. I said, "Adam, you're not letting me get my line." And the directors would catch it, say, "Adam, you stepped on his line. You got to let him say his line." Well, I had to do it. Well, what do you mean? Why did you have to do it? Well, I was in the momentum. I felt the urgency of the situation. And all right, well, you feel the urgency after the shot. You get back in there and let the actor say his line. I mean, you know, it's that kind of stuff. Then the two of us would have the two shot, and all of a sudden, right in the middle of the shot, without any, and we're supposed to be standing there just talking, he would turn as though he's thinking and walk right up to the camera, completely obliterating me. And all you can see is his face in an extreme close-up of his mouth. And they say, "Cut, Adam, what are you doing?" Is, well, I mean, I had to, you know, I had to do this because the character's thinking about it. And in other words, and they would always make him go back and do it the right way. And everybody knew what he was doing, and he knew what he was doing. But, you know, they'd kind of like, "Okay, Adam, all right, you got your take. Now we got to use this one. So don't do that again." You know, really nice. But he used to say to me all the time, and I say, "Adam, why did you take I only have two words. Why did you destroy my other word?" "Oh, I had to do it, Burt. I'm sorry, I had to." Well, later on in my book, you know, there came a time when retribution occurred, when he was in a very odd situation, and I locked him in a hallway at a hotel, and he had no key to get back in his room, right? And at the time, he wasn't wearing much because he'd been partying with all these girls. And long story short, he's banging on my door. "Burt, you got to open this door. I got to get in here." You know what I mean? I said, "Gosh, Adam, I'm sorry. I had to do it." "What do you mean? Open this door." "I'm sorry, I can't, Adam." You know, and anyway, so we had, I mean, he and I played jokes on each other. We were such good friends. We really were really good friends. I mean, we would do these appearances. My gosh, thousands of appearances. He would do things like take my bat boots and put them in the freezer. And here I got to go out, and you take them out of a freezer. You know, they're frozen. Put your bare feet in these boots. I mean, you talk about getting cold feet, right? And then I would get even. I'd put itching powder in his tights, and he'd get in there and start like this. And and I say, "Geez, Adam, you're moving kind of funny." He said, "Oh, this itches me all over," you know. So, but we really had a good time, and we had a genuine fondness for each other, and it really carried through all those years, you know.
And we talk about some of the main cast in that first season. You had, you know, such acclaimed actors, you know, Alan Napier, you know, Neil Hamilton, what you call it, Stafford Rep.
Right. He was Chief O'Hara. Madge Blake, she was Aunt Harriet. I mean, all these are very established actors. And my gosh, the guest villains were, I mean, every one of these, every week I was meeting somebody that I either was watching on television or watched in a movie theater. I mean, you know, we had like some of the great actors of all time that made appearances, and I must tell you something. They loved being on Batman. And let me tell you why. Because Batman gave them an opportunity to be as big and bold as they wanted to be. They weren't locked into a character with only certain characteristics. They could be as bad as they wanted to be. They could be as loud. They could be as boisterous. Whatever they wanted to create in their character, and they loved it. I mean, Cesar Romero was the Joker with a famous Joker laugh. Frank Gorshin was the Riddler. He had a great Riddler laugh too.
Julie Newmar.
We so many. Julie Newmar was Catwoman. Burgess Meredith was the Penguin. We had so many great actors and actresses that it was just it was an amazing time. It was amazing.
You also had like major stars like pushing to make cameos on the show, right? I mean, the big.
Well, what happened? There weren't enough villain roles. You only could have one villain a week, right? And because we were on twice a week, but each villain it was a 2-part episode with a cliffhanger, which was I thought pretty cool as well. Same bat time, same bat channel. But there was so many actors that wanted to get on that the producers were under such pressure that they created this special scene where Batman and Robin would be walking up the side of the building and a window would open, and that's where the celebrity was. So the first one was Sammy Davis Jr. And then there was Dick Clark, Don Ho, Lurch, Colonel Klink, Betty White. I mean, there was all these people that were such familiar people, that and people loved it, and they loved it. And it's so funny when I would have a chance to talk to these actors and actresses, because the way it really works is you sit around for 45 minutes waiting, and then you work for 30 seconds. Right? Then you sit around 45 minutes and work for another 30 seconds. So there was time that I could actually have a conversation. I was a little intimidated to talk to some of them, but I would ask them a question or something, and they would be very nice to me, very, very nice to me. And so it was just a real pleasure to work with these people and to hear their thoughts. And I must tell you, I was so impressed. I mean, here I was, with like Cesar Romero and then one of the famous old actresses, a very famous Tallulah Bankhead, and then George Raft, who played this bad guy in all the 40s and 50s movies. I mean, and here they're on set, and I'm seeing them, talking to them, and it's like, gosh, I was so impressed with how professional they were. I mean, this is like old Hollywood, not like today with these prima donnas and this and that. These are people that were real actors. I mean, they took their craft seriously. They were so dedicated. They knew their lines. Everything was just like perfect. And they were with the director, they were like a fine-tuned instrument that they could do whatever the director wanted. If the director wanted a certain attitude or a certain thing. And it was just so impressive to me that somebody could take their craft and so respectfully as they did. And that's why you have really the old Hollywood with the great actors and actresses. It's different nowadays, but it was something to be it was so impressive to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I know some of the legends I worked with, they were all the same way, which I really, really appreciated. So we're dying to ask you about the episode with Bruce Lee, and you were friends ahead of time, but it's like television lore that he refused to film a scene where he would lose to Robin. Is that actually true? And how was it working with him and filming a fight scene with such a legend?
It's like a fish story. You catch a minnow in Los Angeles, and by the time you hear about it in New York, it was a whale. I mean, It was no. Bruce and I lived in the same condominium complex.
Oh,
okay. And he and I met, and we used to spar together. When I started Batman, I was a brown belt, became a black belt in karate, and but he and I got along well. We just got along, and we'd like go out to dinner. I remember one time going into Chinatown with Linda, his wife, and Brandon at the time, his son, was 6 months old, and we went down into Chinatown to have dinner. And because Bruce had lived in Hong Kong for 10 years, he knew all the most authentic stuff to order that wasn't even on the menu. But we used to spar together, and we, because he trained 8 hours a day. It could be Christmas Day, and he'd train 8 hours a day. And he, I mean, he was just totally, the level of dedication was just absolutely amazing. So when it came to doing, he was cast as Kato in the Green Hornet. And a piece of trivia that for your viewers is that, of course, Bruce became by far the most famous cinematic martial artist of all time. And I don't think anybody will ever, exceed what he did, in my opinion. But a piece of trivia for your viewers is that Bruce Lee's first filmed fight scene of his career was fighting me on Batman.
Oh.
And William Dozier, the executive producer of Batman, was also the producer of the Green Hornet. And Batman at the time was the number 1 and number 2 show in the entire world. I mean, we were number 1 in the entire world. Okay, so we started in January 12th, 1966, and we were mid-season replacement. But it was in the fall that ABC, same network, and was going to carry the Green Hornet. And what better a way to introduce his new television series than to bring it on to the most popular show in television? But because Batman and Robin were good guys and the Green Hornet and Kato were good guys, they wanted everything to be even. And what's interesting is that in our episode, Batman and Robin didn't know that Kato and the Green Hornet were good guys. We thought they were bad guys. And Kato and the Green Hornet thought that Batman and Robin were bad guys. Okay. Neither of us knew. I mean, that's the way they wanted it, but they wanted it to be, first of all, the kind of sparring that Bruce and I did, which was really rough, is absolutely not what they wanted on Batman. There was never, it was always to be bigger than life. It was always to be like you pick up a chair and knock it over somebody's head and they might fall down, and a minute later they're back up again, right? There's never any real hurt. No blood. I mean, it had to be, like cinematic, So in any event, the stuntmen prepared, because that was their main job, was preparing the fight scenes. And when I say preparing, it took days for them to plan out these fight scenes. If this is, a typical fight is going to be like a few seconds. It's not going to be like a minute of screen time with tables and this and that and swinging from this. So the stuntmen, their main job was to design these fight scenes, and they would spend a week preparing a fight scene, and they would do some of the distance stuff because they knew exactly what the producers had wanted. But then on all the close-ups, that I would do my close-ups and Adam would do his close-ups, and sometimes I would do the far shots. But so the point is that in this particular situation, it was very clear, it was made to us extremely clear, none of this is to look like full contact. I mean, none of this is to look like you're really hurting the other person, and it had to be 100% even, not even the slightest bit. And Bruce knew that. And he and I were friends anyway. And so that's how we filmed it. And that's how it came across. Very, very even. But all of the, there's so many Bruce Lee fans, and they, want to believe what they want to believe. But they weren't there. I was there, and I was friends with him. And I wasn't intimidated with him because when we sparred, it was a lot rougher and a lot more painful than just doing this, for this one particular scene.
What was behind the decision to bring in Yvonne Craig as Batgirl?
I think, we had a little bit of a problem because the budgets of making Batman it was such a high budget film, a series to make. The studio, as I understand, was losing money on every episode, $200,000 or $300,000. Now this is back in is like today, losing $2 or $3 million a week. Okay.
Yeah.
And instead of having a typical crew of about 15 or 20 people, we had crews that range anywhere from 30 to 80 people on a crew, because you had to have giant exploding birthday cakes or things with quicksand, and all these things had to work, had to be believable. So it took so many people to do it. And as a result of that, they were over budget. And there was a person who was the unit production manager, whose job it was to try to keep things moving. And he really wasn't a director, but he went to the producers. This is the second to the last season, and said, if you let me direct these shows, I'll bring everyone in on budget. And he did, but he cut corners. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't paid off visually, that, you know what I mean? And Adam and I weren't happy about it. And then it affected the ratings. So then now a decision was made, well, let's introduce Batgirl for all the young girls, that she could be a superhero for them. And so Yvonne Craig, very nice, very, very nice lady. After Batman, she came out to visit my wife and I, and just the sweetest lady. She actually wrote an introduction to my book, so she was great to work with, and she was a professional ballet dancer, so she could do great kicks and stuff like that. And we all had a good time. It was we made the best of what was, so at the time it was so far ahead of its time. The writing, the directing, the everything Batman. It was just it caught the world by surprise, really.
Now, I want to ask, the show was canceled, and NBC said they're going to pick it up, but ABC destroyed the sets. I mean, was that customary to do, like, right so quickly like that?
Well, the Bat Cave took up a whole soundstage. Now that's pretty expensive real estate to, that they couldn't produce anything else there. So apparently that they took the Bat Cave down, which was, again, it was $600,000 back then, which is about $6 million in today's money. So it's unfortunate, because it would have been great. And, we were saddened for it to leave. But yeah, I think if we could have had, a variety of directors, and we could have had maybe a little bit bigger budget, go back to the thing that we had. But also, there's the term show business, right? So it is a business. And when you're losing that kind of money, the studio made a decision that, hey, with 120 episodes in the can, we can rerun this forever. We don't get paid as much as a brand new show, but we have no cost. It's pure profit. We can recoup and make our investment in the original series, profitable, which they did.
Sure. Now, I want to talk briefly about your memoir there too. Like I said, your memoir is just one of the best show business that I've ever read. Was anyone upset that when it came out? Were people upset that the stories that you told?
I'm sure they were, and I knew, and I knew what Adam was going to be in a little bit of trouble. Okay, and I tried. Okay, I didn't lie about anything. Everything in that book is real. Okay. But, I tried to avoid things that would implicate anything that was during his marriage. You know what I mean? So, but I knew that I'm sure when he read that book, he probably laughed, had a great time reading it, and then had a horrible realization that he had to go home. So, and the thing is, the book is written in the Batman style, where it isn't raunchy or anything. It's pretty, very realistic and very truthful. But at the same time, it's in that Batman style where you're never really sure, well, wait a minute here. Or, am I being put on or what? And one of the top writers on Batman was Stanley Ralph Ross, who created Wonder Woman. He created that TV series Wonder Woman, and an amazing man and a dear friend. Oh my gosh! And he was my editor on the book, and he just had a funny way of, I mean, looking at things, and he just helped me, fix things here or there, continuity and stuff like that. But I mean, and if you notice it, I mean, and it's truly a book you can judge by its cover. I will say that the episode titles of the chapters were named after television shows, right? So, there were episodes like Three's Company or Eight is Enough. I mean, and and people can think what they want, but it was done with that Batman flair, and it was it was in the style of Batman, and I know Adam loved it, but and there were most people, I would tell people, I said, look, I got to warn you, this is pretty, you got to understand, this is pretty juicy. Oh, don't worry, Bert. Everybody says that to me. So, so then they would read the book and come back to me and said, "Oh, you warned me." Okay. And they said, but once I got over the initial shock of what I was reading, okay, that initial shock got me. But once I got over the initial shock, I loved it. I read that whole book without putting it down. It looked 4 hours. I read that book. I couldn't put it down till I got to the end, and it was fun writing it. It was 100% truthful. In retrospect, maybe I might have not written it. But it was a story of a young actor, totally not in the movie business, coming in, not knowing anything about it, even though you studied, but to be involved in what it really goes on in making movies and experiencing the kind of success that Batman had.
You made special appearances like Robin or Dick Grayson through the years. A couple of years ago, they had the Crisis on Infinite Earth storylines on, and I was looking forward to, I loved every single one. They were so well done. You appeared in the Supergirl one. How much fun was that for you to do?
It was great fun. And I'll tell you something kind of interesting, that when I got there, I just thought I didn't, I mean, what they ultimately did, which was so terrific, they used my scene right in front of the main titles. Okay, which launched the main titles, okay, which was really, I mean, terrific positioning. But one of the things I wasn't expecting is, because they didn't tell me what the script was till I got there, and they didn't tell me that I would be walking a dog. Well, my wife and I operate the world's largest giant breed dog rescue, so we're expert handlers. And I thought, well, gee, maybe that's a nod to the fact that, we have this world's largest giant breed dog rescue. But then, the dog I was walking was a German Shepherd, and that's not a giant breed. And I got thinking about it. I say, something rings a bell. And I went and did some quick research, and I found out that the German Shepherd that they gave me to walk was actually a character in the Batman comic books called Ace the Bat Dog. Ace the Bat Dog. So they gave me Ace the Bat Dog. And here I thought it was because we had so many dogs, 50 dogs in my house, and they were like giving me a nod to that. But no, it was Ace the Bat Dog. And of course, that was fun to do it. It was a very sweet dog. So it was, it was a great little bit. It wasn't much, but a lot of people saw it. And a lot of people were surprised by it. A lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, I'd like to have Burt more stuff and stuff like that." But it was great fun doing that. And then after that, Warner Brothers came to me. They produce these every couple of years. They produce these incredible coffee table books that are, I mean, just like the finest paper and they had done one on Superman. Superman 80 years of Superman, 80 years of Batman, and then they came and they decided they were going to do Robin, the Boy Wonder, with every Robin comic book, put in this one book, and they came to me to write. If they said, would you give us a quote or something for it? I said, well, I'll do better than that. If you'd like, I'll write the introduction. He said, you will? I said, yeah. And I wrote the introduction, and with only 3 or 4 grammatical things that their editor did, which is almost nothing, the entire thing I wrote is basically the introduction in the book. And I mean, it was a tremendous honor. It's an incredible book. Let me see if I have one here. Hold on a second.
Sure.
This is movie magic here, huh?
Yes. Oh, there it is. There it was. Yes.
Oh,
that's fantastic.
We'll definitely put a graphic up with that cover on it. In the show.
Yeah, you can get the cover online. Anyway, it was nice. You know what I mean? And they gave me a beautiful beautiful opportunity, which I used, and it was very complimentary of having done that, because
absolutely,
other than the one short role played in a Batman movie, there was no other Robin really. Nobody played Robin as much as I have in my career.
Wow.
And anyway, it was a great honor to introduce the book. And it was, oops, let me get my camera. Jeez. Let's see here. There we go.
Well, talking about...
You stayed in constant contact with Adam West throughout his life, yes?
Oh, yeah. Well, we were personal friends. We would go out and play tennis on the weekends. Adam and I, we like to play tennis. And there were times where we'd be if we were on a public court, people in the next court would look over and say, oh my gosh, it's Batman and Robin playing tennis,
That's
but he and I were very good friends. And when we did a lot of these car shows, and memorabilia shows, and we hold arena records in some of the biggest arenas in the United States. For example, McCulloch Place in Chicago. I think we hold the attendance records for a weekend of 188,000 paid attendance, more than any rock band. And then in that's McCormick Place, and then in Detroit, there's another big arena there that we had like 187,000 paid attendance on a weekend. So people came out in droves. The average time to get an autograph, people would stand in line like 5 hours, and they'd sometimes be holding their kids, and poor little kids, by the time they got up to the line, they'd already were asleep, I mean, but that didn't happen all the time. But what could you do? I mean, there's just so many people, and we'd have it where we'd pull. I remember in Dallas, we were coming into this Dallas arena, and they were not only in this giant building, but out the building, down an entire block. I mean, there must have been at least, I don't know, 5,000 or 10,000 people in line. It was just, it was crazy. You couldn't believe anything. I said, oh my God, they'll probably get in by 2 days from now. Just so many people. But and he and I got along great, and we worked great together. And Adam was a really funny man. I mean, he just had a natural sense of humor that was amazing.
So you were in contact with him till he passed?
Yes, we were. 3 weeks before, we did an appearance together in Los Angeles, right by the airport, at a hotel where they had these memorabilia signings, and we had breakfast together. And I think what happened with Adam was unexpected completely. He wasn't sick, to my knowledge, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I wished I knew more, because maybe I could have intervened or somehow to try to help the situation. But it was a terrible loss. This is 2017, so it's now going on 6 years. And I miss him terribly.
Sure. I think many people do. Yeah. You mentioned before about the animal rescue. You and your wife Tracy are huge animal welfare activists. First of all, I want to know how you two met and how did you start devoting yourselves to animal, this this endeavor, working with animals.
Well, we met in kind of an unusual way. Tracy's Tracy and her father were extremely. Her father was the most famous corporate raider in America, and Tracy wanted to do charitable work, and he wanted her to run his 3,600 companies that did $26 billion in sales annually. Yeah. And I'll name out of 3,600 companies, I'll name two companies that he owned. You've probably heard of. One is called Arby's. They make roast beef sandwiches. Another one called RC Cola. Those were 2 out of 3,600. Anyway, God. Long story short, Tracy has always wanted to do charitable work, and her father only wanted her to run his empire. And I mean, it was a true empire. So because I was, besides being an actor, also a business person, I was running a publicly traded company that was doing charitable work. Her father heard about it, and he wanted his daughter, Tracy, to take a look at acquiring an interest in our company so that I could do this charitable work that she wanted to do, so he could force her to just do his stuff, right? And I mean, I can sort of see how it would work out. So she was out here in Southern California from Miami on business with RC and Arby's. And he said, I need you to talk to this guy because there's a potential acquisition or interest. And, I want him to do this charitable work. I don't want you spending 2 hours a day doing this. You're only working for the companies. And so she didn't want to do that. She wanted to do what she wanted to do, her own charitable work. So she tried not to call me. And after a week of being out here, she was due to go back. He says, as she related to me later, he said, look, now you've been there a week. You haven't called the guy. And I hate to pull the boss thing, but if you don't call him now, it's Friday and it's 5 o'clock at your time out there. And again, you don't call him and now, then you're going to go stay there and you're going to go in and see him on Monday. So you call him now. And if he's one of us, he'll still be working there on a Friday night, but if he's not one of us and he's gone and he doesn't answer the phone, then you can, fly back. So she said, okay. And she waited an hour and a half till 6:30, figuring I'm going to make sure this guy is gone, right? He's not going to be at that office on a Friday night at 6:30 at night. Sure enough, I was there, right? And we talked for like 2 hours, and then we agreed to meet, and we met on a Sunday there, and we talked for 12 hours straight.
Oh wow!
And and I'll never forget. She was flying back to New York the next day, and I went to give her a kiss on the cheek. Just a friendly kiss on the cheek. And she said, "No, I would never kiss anybody that I wasn't going to marry." I mean, she's really conservative, right? And I said, okay. And then as she told me later on, she says, oh, I should have kissed him. I think I'm going to marry him. And the next day she flew to New York. I said, you need to come back and marry me. She said, you're right. And then she called her father. Okay. And she had related to me a story that when she was 3 years old, her father said to her, Tracy, whatever you do, I don't want you ever moving to California or marrying an actor, right? That's the two things he asked her since she was 3 years old, okay? And so she calls her dad to say, hey, I've fallen in love and I'm getting married. In fact, she went further and said, I've already gotten married. All right, because in her mind, if she found the right person, that was it. And we've been married since 1990, but when we first met in 1989, that's almost 33 years. So anyway, he got very upset, and he called me and said, listen, I was going to offer you $10 million to buy an interest. I'll tell you what, I'll send you the 10 million. You put my daughter on a plane back to Miami. Okay. And I said, thank you very much, sir, but I actually love your daughter. And I mean, it's an amazing amount of money. I never had any money like that, but I really love your daughter, and I'd rather not have the money and have your daughter, as my wife. So I thought that would be the end of it, but no, oh no. What happened was he called her up and told her, and which I can't believe a father would do that, to tell their daughter that he was trying to, end that relationship and have her come back to Miami. You know what I mean? And he said, that idiot turned down $10 million to send you back. And, I thought when I would talk to her, when I found out later that she was told about it, I thought she's going to be really proud of me, right? And she called me up and yelled at me. And I said, what are you so upset about? She said, you are an idiot. You should have taken the $10 million. I'm not going anywhere, And that's a true story. And my wife's brilliant in business. I mean, just and beautiful person, and just the sweetest person. And we just get along. I mean, we're together 24 hours a day for like 33 years. It just, it was kind of like the wonderful friendship that I had with Adam. This was a love thing with my wife that was just perfect chemistry, I mean, very few things in life work out really well, and this has just worked out absolutely wonderfully. So, so what happened was, because we had a child, we have a child together, and we wanted to get her a big dog. I thought, well, I have always liked Great Danes, and Tracy's always liked Irish Wolfhounds, so we decided to look for one, and we heard about Great Danes in Southern California being killed in animal shelters, left and right. And these are giant dogs that are so gentle. Let me tell you something. There's a reason they call them gentle giants. Believe it or not, the bigger the dog, the more gentle they are, because they're not intimidated by a human. They're in some cases bigger than a human. They're not intimidated. So we heard that, and every breed of dog has a rescue. So there's a Chihuahua rescue, there's German Shepherd rescues, there's Poodle rescues, there's Great Dane rescues. But the person who was running the Great Dane rescue in Southern California, a lady had died herself. And now there was no one to save these dogs. So when somebody had to give up a Great Dane, like they had to move or something, and there was nobody to take him, it would go to the shelter. And within 3 or 4 days, it was killed, even though it was a gentle, sweet dog. And this was the first week in August of 1994. I said to my wife, Tracy, I said, we can't let these dogs die. We got to do something, even if it's just temporary. Let's just take these dogs. And I'm sure in a couple of weeks, we can find somebody who will take this over. But we can't let them die. They're dying every day right now. So she said, okay. And by the end of August of 1994, we started the first week. We had in our house, now this is not in another building or outside in the yard, but in our house, I had 102 full-size Great Danes.
Wow.
Oh my
102
Lord.
And 61 puppies under 7 weeks of age because of litters that we rescued from shelters. We've never bred a dog. We never would breed a dog. There's too many homeless dogs, but we had 61 puppies from 7 litters. And Tracy, all her background in business and everything, was sleeping on our kitchen floor, helping these mothers nurse these puppies and making sure when the mother stood up, because a Great Dane is so big, when it stands up, if it steps on a puppy, it'll kill the puppy. And she's like protecting, making sure no puppies got hurt, because the mother would nurse and then want to get up and go out and go to the bathroom. She would incubate the puppies in a warm area until the mother got back, and then bring in the next litter. And by the time she was done with the 7th litter and the 7th mother, it was time to start the first one over again, because every couple of hours they have to, it nearly killed her. And after about 3 or 4 months, then they were old enough where, they weren't nursing anymore. They were, so we started rescuing that breed, and we became the world's largest. I mean, I don't know anybody that has had, and by the way, now we're going on our 30th year, more than 15,500 dogs.
Wow.
More than 15,000 lived in our house. Everyone lived in our house. usually about 50 at a time. When we got that number down, we had to we adopted them to what we thought were really good homes. And so thereafter, we got a special permit to do this, and we always stayed within our numbers, which is about a little more than 50 dogs. And we would rescue them. But because these giant breed dogs, they traditionally live the shortest lifespan. I mean, Mastiffs and Irish Wolfhounds only live 6 to 8 years. Amazingly beautiful. Great Danes only live 7 to 9 years. And when we would lose a dog, oh my gosh, Tracy and I would sob. So we decided if we could, we would find a way to help them live longer. And from having so many animals that you're caring for 24/7, at all times, 50 dogs in your house, okay, that we developed a special way of feeding and caring for them. And we found that by the special way we fed and cared for them, they were averaging living about 3 years longer, every dog. And that's like pretty terrific. And then we got to a point we said, well, is there anything else we could do? And I said, what if we made the finest food in the world for our dogs? They could live even longer. So we went out and we spent a ton of money, and we got 4 top nutritionists that we could find, and we got our food designed, which is different from every other dog food. And that's when all of a sudden things started to happen, where when we would be adopting dogs, people would come to adopt and they'd see a 16 or 18-year-old Great Dane, twice their normal lifespan, right there in front of them. I mean, you could tell the dog was old, but still could run around. Okay, it was old, but you could run around. It was living a normal, happy life. And, vets couldn't believe this unless they saw it, because nobody else had done it. And the food that we made, because it's different than every other dog food, was allowing these dogs to live much longer and healthier. And people say, well, what is this food? And by the way, we never intended to sell it. We now sell it all across the country in the US and in Canada, because the people that came to adopt from us, when they would adopt a dog, they would say, okay, well, I see that you've got these dogs living twice their normal lifespan. I want that food. And we said, well, wait a minute, we just made it for our rescue. This is so, it takes all of our time, night and day, to care for all these dogs in our house. We never thought about selling it. And they said, well, I'm not going to adopt the dog if you don't sell me the food. Oh my gosh, well, we better go check about labeling laws, and we better get this official so we can legally sell it, and which we did. And so that's how, and one thing led to another, and somebody adopted was a store manager of a big chain of grocery stores. And all of a sudden now we're all over the United States. It's called Gentle Giants, and we're in Target stores across the US. We're in H-E-B in Texas. It's a big grocery chain in Texas. We're Southern California, Stater Brothers and Ralph's and Gelson's. And anyway, we're all across the country in stores. And people are getting similar results to what we are. We recently got a voicemail from someone that their dog, they had a giant breed called a Bernese Mountain Dog, lives only 7 to 8 years actually average, and their dog lived to 24 years of age on our food.
Oh my Lord!
24. Okay, now that's triple the normal lifespan, and all the time people will call us, because we have a website, gentlegiantsdogfood.com. And then for our cat food, we have gentlegiantscatfood.com. But people would call us. I mean, and we still get about 1,100 people a week that contact us. And they'll say things like, I don't understand. I look on your website and I see videos of dogs in their 20s running around like puppies. And my dog is 7.5 years old, and he's starting to have a problem getting up and starting to have a problem walking. That seems so unfair. And then we tell them how to feed their dog, and we get them on our food. And I must tell you, so many people say, well, what is this? Is some kind of magic food? I said, no, it's not. It's all science. For example, I don't know if either of you have a dog, but if you do have a dog, when we hang up, go pick up some of your dog's food, like that kibble, rub it in your fingers real good, put the kibbles down and rub your fingers together. You're going to feel a slightly greasy feeling, because pet food manufacturers fill their food with fat and coat the outside of their food with fat, because what it does, it confuses dogs' brains to believe they're hungrier than they really are. So they'll eat more food to make you buy more dog food. No, we don't do that. Oh, no, no way. I mean, okay, our food is bone dry. And then another thing is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in our food supply in the United States, 98% of our human food supply, as well as animal food supply, has been genetically modified. I mean, did you know that you're eating GMOs? I mean, and people say, well, what is that? I say, well, you've got to understand, when farmers would grow a plant like, say, rice, and they would grow it, pests would attack the plant, and then they'd spray a pesticide to kill the pest. Half the time it would kill the plant. Well, in 1996, Monsanto came out with Roundup, you know, the one that you hear about on television causing cancer in humans, right? And they took the glyphosate, which is in Roundup, which is the cancer-causing thing, and they mixed it into the DNA of fruits and vegetables, and to create what they call Roundup-ready crops for farmers. And what it does is, when a farmer grows, again, using rice as an example, that and pests attack it, they can spray a pesticide on it, and it will kill the pest but not kill the plant, because it's now in the DNA of the plant. So the farmer produces the crop, sells it, makes all his money, but the bad thing is that crop has absorbed the pesticide. And dogs have much more frail immune systems than human beings. And so do cats, so do all animals. They're much more frail. So, and we have on our website, GentleGiantsDogFood.com, a section called non-GMO ingredients. I just want to mention for your viewers, if they get a chance, they should go to GentleGiantsDogFood.com and look at and see this menu, and you'll see a menu item that says non-GMO ingredients in Gentle Giants Dog Food. We put an 8-minute video up that, and we didn't make it, we took it from the premier research society in the US that analyzes GMOs in human and animal feeds. And this video is so important because everyone interviewed is a veterinarian. And all these veterinarians are saying the same thing, and which is 10, 15, 20 years ago, they would see one dog or cat a month that had cancer. Now, in today's world, with the GMOs in 98% of our food supply, that every single day, this is every vet saying this, every single day, 1 out of every 2 patients they see, dog or cat, has cancer. And they attribute that to the GMOs in the food supply. So we made a food from that 2% in the United States that is non-GMO. Our food is non-GMO, and it's not coated or filled with fat. And those 2 things alone can add 10 years to your dog's life. Plus, we feed our dogs differently. We feed our dogs 5 or more times a day. People say, why would you do that? Because everybody traditionally feeds only twice a day. Well, guess what? Dogs' bodies wear out faster than humans. And the greatest stress on a dog's body is digestion. So when you make a dog have to only eat every 12 hours on average, you're making that dog's body wear out much faster. And that's how our dogs are running around like puppies in their 20s, because we're not prematurely wearing their bodies out. And that includes elevating your food and water dishes. People say, well, why do you do that? I say, well, just think about it. You put that bowl of food and water on the floor, every time your dog eats, he's got to lean down to get the food. Then he comes up, then lean down to get the water, up and down every day. You're prematurely wearing the dog's body out. We elevate our food and water dishes to a specific height, such that a dog only tilts their head down to eat or drink, but never lean down. All of this is on our website, Special Feeding Care Program, GentleGiantsDogFood.com. It's our charity. We love animals. By the way, we take no salary whatsoever from our food. This is not about making money. This is about helping animals live the longest, healthiest life possible.
No, it's a great site. I was on there. Like I mentioned before we started filming, I wanted to get the food from my own dog, who's a very picky eater.
Well, they love our food because we have no chemicals. and no artificial preservatives. And now I see these pet foods that are bragging with new artificial preservatives. Their food, instead of having a 1-year shelf life, now has a 3-year shelf life. I wouldn't be bragging about that. I mean, would you want to feed your dog a food that was made 3 years ago? No. And we make our food fresh every week. We make it fresh. And the day after we make it, we ship it, and people are getting fresh food for their dogs, freshly made with all natural ingredients, no GMOs. And that's why when you give animals the best food, and by the way, all of that fat that I was describing to you, that's clogging dogs' arteries and intestines. And you know, dogs, like humans, get heart attacks when you clog their arteries and clog their intestines. So we don't do that. And as a result, dogs eating our food run around like puppies when they're in their late teens and early 20s.
Well, I did want to ask, before you let you go, Leo, I wanted to ask,
Sure.
you mentioned briefly about your Hollywood Walk of Fame, thing where Kevin Smith was actually helped introduce you to. Just how
Right.
satisfying was that to be, recognized now finally for your work? You did mention that you took so long time, but to finally be acknowledged for it, how gratifying was that for you?
Well, it's a tremendous honor. I mean, it's in perpetuity, it's right there on Hollywood Boulevard, right in front of the Guinness Museum of World Records, which is probably the best place to have it. And they even position Adam and my stars where they face each other. See, I don't know if you've been there, but on Hollywood Boulevard, if you're walking east to west, for example, every other star is facing you, so you can read it, who it is and what they got their star for. And vice versa, coming the other direction, every other one is facing the other way. So it worked out that Adam and I have our stars facing each other at about the exact distance when we would do our 2 shots together. And they went to a lot of trouble, and they did it right in front of the museum, the Guinness Museum of World Records. And I mean, you couldn't have been better. The best placement you could have.
Well, are there any plans for you to appear as Robin again in any future adaptations?
Well, there may be. I don't know about that, but I will tell you this. In addition to our charity work, my wife and I now are going to be making our own television shows and our own feature films. And we have a big, beautiful property here halfway between Los Angeles and Palm Springs. And we've just now completed our animation studio and recording room, and now we're building our own soundstage. So we're going to be able to using 3D animation, state-of-the-art technologies to create our own programming. And I will tell you one thing that you might find interesting. When I met my wife back in 1989, which ultimately became my wife, we were talking about, and she's totally into computers and stuff. We were talking about computer animation and making movies, and she said something to me that I found to be incredibly unbelievable. She said, and this is in 1989, she said, Burt, someday one person will sit down at a computer and make an entire feature film by themselves. I said, Tracy, don't ever say that to anybody. They're going to think you're crazy. No way. That's impossible. Guess what? It's possible now. It is possible with the right equipment that we have, the right technology, motion capture. I mean, there's so much that can be done, and we're doing that. So, instead, we're not going to have 500 animators. We don't need them. We've got, all the computer power we need to create the programming that we want to do and film stuff, state of the art, using 3D and stuff. And we think that audiences are going to love it, because everything we're going to do is family entertainment, and it's all going to be to uplift people, to try to help people find the best things in life. And so our new company is called Superheroes to the Rescue Incorporated. And it's going to make feature films and television series. So, and we're having fun doing it. So I must tell you, I'm actually think that this is a big advancement. Instead of being just the actor. I get to be the actor and the set designer and the director and the computer animator and the music producer. Oh my gosh, and it's something that my wife and I are just having the time of our life doing. But we'll always devote ourselves to animals. We love animals, and this is our life's work. And we're going to promote everything we do with animals, by our feature films and stuff like that.
Well, whenever you release anything, we'd love to have you back. If you want to discuss it, we'd love to have you.
Well, when I have something to show you. And by the way, I forgot to mention, we also make cat food, and our cat food is amazing. We 2 years ago, we lost 2 of our cats. One was 31 years old. The other was 32 years old. Now, the oldest dog we've had a couple at 27. One was 27 and a half. Another was 27 and 10 months. So we're getting amazing results. And one last thing, because of our food and the way we care for our dogs, we have no illness here. No, none. Our dogs are, and I've got 50 in my house now. They're so healthy, okay? Our dogs that the only time they go to a veterinarian is every 3 years for a rabies update. Think about that. No illness, okay? And again, you give them the right food, give them the right care, and you can have them so much longer. Our own daughter has had the same dog for more than 20 years. We got her a dog when she was 1.5 years. It's over 20 years she's had the same dog. And what a great thing for a kid to grow up with a dog. And a lot of people will get their child a dog, but because of the food and other things, that dog sometimes dies when the child is 10 or 11. And now you're trying to explain death to a 10 or 11-year-old that shouldn't have to hear about it at that time, And so our daughter, it's been 20 some odd years and she's had the same dog.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, again, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. We were so looking forward to this. And it's just absolutely incredible to getting to talk to you. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I've enjoyed doing it. We had a great time on Batman. It's made a lasting impression. People love it. It's still watched all over the world. It's in reruns every day in the U.S. And people, so many people say, oh, holy this or holy that, just in their daily conversation. And that's all because of what I did on Batman. So I'm very honored by all of that.
Well, again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Ike Eisenmann. And again, a very special thanks to Burt Ward. And please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.